Welcome back to the Encounter Faith podcast, everybody. My name is Ross, and thanks everybody for listening. Today is an Elisabeth Lectka week, so Elisabeth, welcome back.
Hey, Ross.
I named these all now based off of just whoever the guest is on the podcast. Last week was a mayor week, and today's an Elisabeth week.
Perfect.
So I want to follow up, over the next few weeks, dear listener, we're going to be diving into some of what the mayor of Naperville, Scott Worthy, and I spoke about last week. But it would encourage you, even if you're not someone who listens from this community, to keep listening, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about that is Naperville led is not necessarily Naperville specific. And Elisabeth, I wanted to start with you in this kind of like for our neighbors overview for this unofficial miniseries that we're doing, because one of the most common themes that came up in my conversation with the mayor was all about mental health for our kids. And you and I have spoken about this. We figured it out right before we cut the mics on that this was almost a year ago now. You're someone who's been very open about how important this conversation is to you in your leading and in your preaching. But what I'm curious about to kind of start off is you've been in ministry now long enough to see a lot of conversations change. And I would assume that there's not been any conversation that's changed as quickly or as intensely as the conversation around mental health has been.
Yeah. Yep.
But when you look at your ministry career now versus when you started, I'm curious how you define that change.
I think one of the defining things that I observe in the conversation around mental health is the awareness of resources. Like when you talk with someone who struggles in their mental health, who has ups and downs or has a diagnosis of some kind, like they're well aware of resources, of tools, of shared language, talk about what they're experiencing. The conversation around mental health is not just validating someone's experience, which I think was probably where we were at, I don't know, when I was in high school,
right?
So a couple decades ago, then that was the conversation we were having, was just trying to validate that mental health was a thing, that we could be physically healthy, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, like just kind of validating the experience of having those ups and downs mentally. And that was a real thing.
Right.
And nowadays the conversation is very much, like, how do you manage? What are the words you use? How do you experience it? What accommodations need to happen or could happen or things to be aware of? And that's significant if you're still in the place of like not understanding mental health and then talking to someone who is well versed in the mental health conversation. That shift has happened significantly, I'd say, over the last 10 years.
Yeah. No, you and I are pretty close to the same age. I look a shockingly amount older, but
I have like 3 gray hairs.
Yeah, and most of my hairs are gray. But one of the things, because I agree with how you define that, but one of the things that stands out to me about your career is you have always had to exist in multiple different kinds of spaces. You've led over our families, you've led over our students, you've been influential in different initiatives and small groups and stuff with adults. I try to, in any conversation I'm having, someone who isn't where you're describing, is whether they're an older generation or just not as well versed in the mental health conversation, I always try to use some mental health language, like lead with empathy, and remind myself that that person has just not been given the tools that I've been given. But that can be kind of exhausting work. I'm curious if someone's listening and they are curious, but have definitely used phrases before like, I don't understand why kids today are as soft as they are or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you help folks like that feel equipped to lean in, because what a lot of you dear listeners, you probably have someone in your life that you feel like you've done the things, you said the things, you've done the things, you've shown up, but there's this gap that you don't know how to close.
Yeah.
How do you try to help them close that gap?
Yeah. Right now, our church is going through a sermon series where we're talking about the generations.
Sure.
Kind of like talking the 80s, 90s, etc.
Yeah.
Only 4 weeks, so we only get four decades
Yes.
in there.
My favorite part is calling throwback and then starting in the 80s, because there's a lot of you who are listening who's like, the 80s wasn't throwback for me.
Yep. But as I've been doing just a little bit of review and research around, okay, what has changed over the decades, that is one of the biggest conversation points for the difference between somebody who's born even in the 90s versus someone who was born in the 70s is the technology appearance. So one of the factors that influences how, especially young people and the mental health conversation is fueled is by social media and technology, because the conversation is online, the resources are online, you can do therapy online, all of that makes it just right at your fingertips, and it's a natural part of conversation in the social media world, especially in the younger generations. And so if you have some distance from that conversation, it's probably because social media is not your native world.
Right.
You're not native to the technological world like the younger generations are. Or you don't have kids that are currently in that world. And because it's inescapable.
Yeah.
And so I've mentioned this before, but obviously I'm in the world of students, as my career for the last 10 years. And I am someone who was very native to the digital world.
Right.
But I read within the last 2 years, I don't even remember, maybe it was last year, the book Anxious Generation. And it is really helpful for parents, but it's also really helpful for anyone who's trying to understand the conversation around mental health, but also why our kids and teens are the way they are and the cultural influences that are present.
Right.
And even the practical application of what can we do as people who love someone who's struggling with their mental health, or someone who just wants to be more well-versed in the conversation.
For sure.
That book was unique in the ways that it talked about the research behind the cultural influences and then didn't just say, hey, good luck. But it ended in a place of what does it look like for your community to address this? What does it look like for your local government to address this? What does it look like for schools and for churches and for family units and for individuals? What are some steps that you could take?
For sure.
And I found that to be really helpful because it gave tools to people that just didn't really know where to start.
Yeah.
So I think that answers your question.
It does. I mean, one of the things that I'm always sensitive to in conversations like this is that I want to avoid it being just 30 minutes of people agreeing. Because I agree with everything you said. I think my life group recently went through Anxious Generation, and one of the it's a great first place to start. If you're listening, you're looking for a place to start. It's a great first place to start, because to tell part of my wife's story, one of the things that she took away from that book was realizing the difference in her experience in her sister, who's 8 years younger.
Yeah.
Same family, same primary influences, but an entirely different set of secondary and cultural influences simply because of those 8 years. Yeah.
I mean, the ways, even just thinking about the rollout of social media, I was in middle school when MySpace was kind of ending. And then we moved to Facebook.
Right. And
then we were in Facebook, deep into Facebook. And then all of a sudden we kind of moved into Instagram. And then from there we moved into, or Twitter was in there somewhere. I don't know. But and MySpace didn't have the same engagement that Instagram did. But is there 10 years between them? Probably. I don't know. I'm not well versed in all of that. But
you're a pastor, not a social media expert.
Exactly. But even to have 8 years between siblings leads to a different experience for the older versus the younger because of the technology and the way the relational interactions that was happening. For sure. Technology and social media has become the way in which young people are creating relationships, are engaging in relationships. And so the ways that technology and social media have moved and changed then influence the ways that that even people born 8 years apart
in the same family.
Friends. Yeah,
totally. The other example I always go to in conversations like this is I used to work for Awana. It's a global child discipleship organization. And through Awana, I got a chance to talk to John Mark Comer, who's this author, speaker, and was a pastor out in Portland. Mm-hmm. And he talked about being invited to speak in like the Bible Belt part of the country. And he would share about all this, sort of post-Christian online, digital discipleship kind of stuff. And his senior pastors would come to them and say, man, I'm really sorry you're dealing with that. That's not what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
And his response was always, I bet I'd have a different conversation with your youth pastor.
Yeah.
Because
that's also true.
His framework, which I loved, was every kid in the country lives in Portland. He's like, I physically deal with that reality, but the internet is Portland. And I say that because my guess is, dear listener, most of you have not been to Portland, but nearly all of us have an opinion about what Portland is. So it's a good metaphor in that regard. But that it leads me to the other thing that I'm curious about for you, because there's a couple different kinds of responses to conversations like this. There's folks who go, kids just need to get over it. I didn't have those types of tools. Mm-hmm. And look at me, I'm fine. Right.
Yeah.
And if that's where you're at, dear listener, I can gently say, I don't think this is the conversation that's going to change your mind. So I'm not expecting to get there right now. But I think there's a large percentage of people who have someone in their life that they feel like there's that gap that they're trying to cross. And what I'm curious about is, you've probably seen examples of both. Mm-hmm. You've seen adults who have done the work to get equipped.
Yep.
And adults who haven't.
Yep.
And in the context of your career, you've seen the impact that that's had on kids.
Yeah.
I'm curious how, in those, for lack of a better term, success stories, what were some of the key differences between those who, for lack of a better term, chose to not engage?
Yeah. I was just talking with a parent yesterday, who I'm sure she'd be okay that if I said this. So I'm just kind of like summarizing, but she was reminding me of a conversation we had, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, talking about like how to manage her child's social media usage.
Sure.
And we were talking about an issue that she was trying to help her child process through, of how to engage appropriately online. And she confessed to me that like she just wanted to take away all phones. Mm-hmm. Just like, the phones are the problem, take away the phones. And my response to her was, okay, but whose team are you on?
That's great.
Because you need to understand that this is how your child is engaging with their friends.
Yeah. This
is how they are texting their friends. This is how they are calling their friends. Right. What you did in high school was pick up your phone and sit on the house phone with the cord across the kitchen for hours and hours. Yep. This is the way that your child is interacting with their friends. Mm-hmm. So how do you get in their world and understand that and help them with the critical thinking that they need, that they don't have yet, because that's how brains work. Like, how do you help coach them with the like critical thinking that they need to make smart choices there, instead of just taking away the access?
Yeah.
Like, you can take away the phone, but it's not going to solve the problem, because they're still going to want to be where their friends are. And I had forgotten that conversation even happened. Of course. But she reminded me of that yesterday, and I was like, yeah, that is the thing. That is the disconnect between kind of being on the outside and being like, what's happening in our kids? It is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It is a different environment than any of us grew up with. And even like you and I, Ross, it is a different environment than when we were in high school. Mm-hmm. We were in high school in Naperville. Mm-hmm. And high schools in Naperville 20 years later are different than what we experienced. And part of just changing the conversation of how we help young people, period, with mental health, with their engagement with friends, with
their walks with Jesus. Yeah.
Like, all of it doesn't matter. How do you help them? You have to understand the world that they're in.
That's good.
You like asking that question, like, whose team are you on? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm on their team. And because I have critical thinking skills and I have patience and I can help them sort through, like, what are the long-term effects of this decision? Mm-hmm. like they don't have those skills. Like they cannot, their second thought after they have an idea, their second thought is not, how does this affect me 5 years from now? Their thought is, who do I get invited? Who's going to do this with me?
Correct.
Like we have to help kids, teenagers, with the critical thinking, with the like problem solving, with the thinking about long-term effects. That happens in every generation. That's what parents have to do. That's what parents had to do 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But now it's in the realm of technology and social media and the things we're dealing with culturally as adults, like our teens are also dealing with. And so we have to get into their world to actually be on their team and help them to make good decisions.
Yeah. It's helpful to me to use that team type of language, because when I think about what a lot of folks who maybe look at that and don't understand it is recognizing the ask from your kid, whether stated or not, is actually not really to understand it. Like I think about the environment where you and I grew up in of, I didn't need my parents to look over my shoulder while I was, while we were all discovering what the internet is, right? Because that's one of the differences between you and I too, is our parents were kind of guessing. And now if you are parenting a kid or a student or a 34-year-old today, you actually have a lot more data and studies and best practices that have been established.
And it's overwhelming.
For sure.
There are parents, this is a natural response. Like there are parents that's like, I don't want to know. I can't deal with it. Like it's too overwhelming. That is an okay and healthy response, but it's not necessarily helpful to guide our kids into understanding how do we interact in the digital world.
Because that's the thing that I'm always fascinated about from folks who've had careers like yours, is you wound up having to stand in the gap in a lot of different ways for people. As anyone who has done any sort of engagement with kids professionally or non-professionally, you wind up having this experience where you go, oh, I have an influence over you, but I am not the primary influence over your life.
Yeah.
And unlike other people who have influence over you, I have an opportunity to connect to the primary influences of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that's fascinating to me about your career particularly is you step into student ministry not that long after being a student, but do so at this beginning of this large societal shift. I'm curious, what has advocating for kids, advocating for people to be on their kids' team, how has that shifted from the beginning of your career to now? Because I would imagine that there's folks who could have maybe tried to like write off some of your expertise 10 years ago that now might take you a little bit more seriously.
Yeah. Well, and also when I started ministry, I was like, I don't have any sort of reason to be speaking to parents about their kids. Like I am 26 years old and there is no reason I should be telling you anything about your child.
For sure.
But I think like what I've learned by standing in the gap, I think that's probably one of my most often repeated phrases with parents is like, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
I'm on your team. I want parents to know I'm on their team. I want kids to know I'm on their team. And sometimes I say that to kids. It's like, I will keep any secret you tell me unless for these reasons.
Right.
And then we're going to your parents together because I'm on your team.
Yes. Yes.
Like part of like, I think when I think about faith development, one of the things that comes up in research over and over again is that like kids need adults that aren't their parents in order to develop a faith that lasts. And so I get to be one of those people.
For sure.
That statistic and research alone gives me authority and influence because kids need me. Students need me. And I have the ability, they do trust me to be able to listen to them, understand them, and translate that to their parents sometimes because I do have some proximity there. Now I'm getting older and farther away from students. And so that it isn't quite as translatable.
Right.
Because all other things, but
that's right. Like, Alice will explain it to you soon enough.
Oh yeah. Eventually Alice will get it and she will begin to explain it to me. But I think that understanding, that research has helped me step into that role a little bit, to see that even though I don't have a kid that's a teenager, even though I'm not a parent and I'm too old to be a teen, I still can have influence because it's what they need. And the more I step into that, the more success I'm going to have in actually caring for the teens that are in proximity to me.
Right.
And so I think I would say like that's translatable to anyone who interacts with young people anywhere. Like if you attend Good Shepherd and you encounter a teenager who's serving in the cafe, it is meaningful to stop and talk to them and ask about if they're in sports or, what are the things that they like to do, or, hey, where do you guys go hang out in Naperville? Like
right.
just to show interest, is an opportunity to build relationship. And we all know teens rebel from their parents. Like that's developmentally appropriate.
Right.
And the more adults that are not their parents that surround teens, the more likely they are to have like the protective factors for mental health, the more likely they are to have the supports they need to ask questions in their faith, the more supports that are available to help advocate for them. Like teens are going to tell non-parents when they're in trouble. They are more likely to call a small group leader when they're in trouble than they are their parents if they feel any sort of tension or judgment from their parents in whatever area.
Right.
And so if we can surround teens with more options of people that love them, we all win.
100%. And that's the thing that to connect back to one of the earlier groups of people I was poorly describing, like that is the sort of shared mission that regardless of your proximity to mental health, I know you can get behind. Because one of the things that I think is important to connect in this conversation is we're having a conversation about kids. We're having a conversation about students and mental health, like a fairly specific conversation. But a lot of what Elisabeth is describing, dear listener, is not a kid thing or a mental health thing. It's just a people thing.
Yeah.
And it's a discipleship thing. And where I think we can kind of begin to transition is there's an element of what students today need for their own discipleship that might look more intense than what previous generations needed or previous generations experienced.
Yep.
But that intensity is fueled by the cultural moment, not the basics of discipleship.
Yeah.
So if someone said to you, what does a student need for discipleship beyond the community you're describing? Like, what are some of those other factors?
Yeah. Beyond relationships,
right,
which are some of the most important, have people to model, have people to lean on. Like students need to know how to develop habits, like healthy habits. I mentioned this just before, like we need students to develop critical thinking skills, long-term thinking skills. Like that takes people willing to help them process. They need safe spaces to be themselves, to ask hard questions, or to just like exist as teens and no one to look at them weird or to wonder what they're doing there. Like just to let teens be teens in a Starbucks without making a big deal of it.
100%.
Great. I could keep going.
No, I know. But I want to emphasize that because having a space to authentically be yourself where you feel like you can belong, having people around you, having opportunity to make mistakes and have people be patient and grace, like every single person listening needs those things too. And part of what it looks like to use John Mark Comer language, practice the way of Jesus in 2025, we all need those things. And that's probably my biggest takeaway from our many off mic conversations about this is something that we can tend to make more complicated than we actually need to.
Yeah.
because discipleship and teens and mental health get treated often like these three separate, very separate islands. And we lose what you just said is the most important factor of that, of relationships, which allow you to see like, oh, this is a person, and maybe I have had some experiences with Jesus that might be helpful to share with that person.
Yeah. And one of the things that for any of us who are well versed in the conversation around mental health and want teens and kids to be authentic disciples of Jesus, when we understand the mental health conversation and connect it to our faith, that's really, really important, because we're able to speak into the conversation of mental health in a Christ-centered way. And it's not that doesn't exist out there, because it does. That's part of the mental health conversations, is there are plenty of Christians that are speaking into that from a Christian perspective. But when we're able to do it in real life with them, that matters, because part of the challenge with the mental health conversation is that it does feel so common. It feels like everyone has a diagnosis. It feels like everyone has something going on. That's not a problem. The problem is helping them understand what Jesus says about that.
Yeah.
And when we can connect the hope of Christ to the hope that they have in their battle of depression, that will help them to understand that Jesus cares about the things that are weighing them down.
Yeah. That's good. Last question for me. One of the things that came up in my conversation with the mayor, which again, dear listener, if you take the time to check out the show notes, you can find wherever you're listening, is he spoke about this very specific, I would argue, epidemic that exists amongst teens of, we talk about this loneliness epidemic for all of us. One of the ways it manifests itself in teens is teens can wind up being incredibly isolated. And then a very specific experience of a teen receiving a message or a text from a friend that's problematic. That speaks to that friend is about to hurt themselves or is in a dangerous situation regardless. And he's led some workshops on this. He's developed teams to lead some workshops on with experts. And he keeps describing how he's like, it's obviously anecdotal, but 80% of teens have had that experience of a friend reaching out in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
And 80% of teens are not equipped to handle that conversation. Yeah. In the same way, every single person who's listening, if they got that text, they would go, oh no, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
How have you helped folks, to use your language, point to what Jesus says about that?
Yeah.
In those kind of moments that you've experienced in your personal life, in your ministry life, and beyond?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, just in those specific scenarios, like what mental health first aid training and kind of crisis response people would say is like, first things first, are they safe?
Right.
And so like that's part of the conversation that is difficult with teens, is trying to help them to understand that like they are not equipped to help that. Like they are not equipped to solve that problem. And that is the normal reaction of teenagers, is to be like, well, I can help. I want to help. Like the really good intention, they want to be someone that looks out for others. And then they're trying to hold that in themselves. And like first step of receiving some sort of like text like that is like, hey, are you safe? Are you like, where are you? Are you in a safe place right now? Like, 2, I'm picking up the phone, I'm coming over, like to assess the situation. And then also like step 3 is like, you call for a wellness check, you call suicide hotline. Like if you identify that like real and present danger is there. Yeah.
Information for that's also in the show notes.
Yes. But like you first respond to the physical need. Like to the need that is present. Like this is a mental health crisis moment. And so I'm going to make sure that this person, my friend, is safe and has the resources that they need, because I alone cannot provide those.
Yep.
And then 2 is bringing Jesus into that scenario. That is, when you're on the phone, you pray for them. Like you take the bold step of faith to say, in this moment, let's take 3 deep breaths and then let's pray. Like, because I don't know what I'm doing, so we're going to talk to the one who does. And using that language to allow the lens of Jesus to infiltrate the ways you're talking and addressing that scenario, whether it be an in the moment suicide crisis, or that's just I had a horrible day and I'm about to quit my job.
Right. That's good.
Hey, okay. Yep. You had a horrible day. Where are you? I'm going to call hey, let's take a moment.
That's really good to not make it just about crisis. Yeah.
That's good. Not just crisis, but when anyone is kind of having this sort of breakdown moment, okay, I will respond. I will physically show up. Mm-hmm. That's practical theology. Mm-hmm. That's incarnation. Mm-hmm. Jesus shows up for us. Step one.
That's good.
And then where can we use our language in the ways that we respond so that we are communicating even indirectly? Hey, I don't have all the answers, but let's pray because I know that Jesus does. Or I don't have all the answers for how this is going to get better right now, but I know that the story of God leads us to redemption and restoration. So today it might not get better, but the promise is that in the end it will. Mm-hmm. And being able to understand that story in such a way that you're able to help someone else see that hope is possible, even if you're not sure how it works in the present.
Thank you for listening to the Encounter Faith podcast. This podcast is a service of G. Shep Productions from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Naperville, Illinois. All rights reserved. If you're in the area, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning at our 9 a.m. or 10:45 services. At Good Shepherd, we are inviting everyone to walk together in the calling of Christ for a life of eternal impact. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Ross Cochran, and our theme song is Wake the Earth by 1111 Worship. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again soon.